Hello, I am in Peru and I'm halfway in the journey. So, quick recap from before. I came out to Peru to do 8 ayahuasca journeys across 15 days with 4 shamans in the jungles. And so I'm halfway into the journey and there just so much has happened I wanted to capture. And in a nutshell, I went into a very deep contraction over the course of 3 days, the first 3 journeys. And then I went into a massive expansion where I experienced singularity and all of duality collapsing into oneness. And then everything that led up to that point and since has been just phenomenal. I'm including a discovery of David Clements, who is a theoretical physicist from Cambridge and Oxford that is now describing almost the exact things that I experienced along my journey that started 2 years ago. And what he's suggesting is happening that aligns with the astrology and aligns with my experience and what's happening across the cosmos is absolutely phenomenal. So I'm going to share all of that over this video. So let me start with about a week and a half before I left. I was woken up in the middle of the night and I had what I thought was food poisoning. My stomach was hurting like crazy, and then I was like diarrhea and I thought I was going to vomit. And it was so painful that I started crying. I blacked out, fell on the floor, and then I was like climbing back up to get to the toilet. I was sweating. I was in so much pain that it was like approaching what it was like to be in labor, that level of pain. I was begging for mercy, wondering what the hell was going on. What had I eaten? And then I finally went to bed, drenched in sweat. I finally fell asleep. Woke up the next morning as if nothing had happened. And everyone else who'd eaten the exact same things I had during the day, no one else got sick. So I put that aside and thought, I don't know what, my system was sensitive to something, maybe it's preparing me for the journey. And then right before I left, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said that she had a dream where that same night, where she was pushing a dark shadow of sexual trauma from my gut. And it was so dark and so deep that she was getting pulled into it in this dream. And then she ended up jumping out of bed, and that's what awoke her. And I discovered childhood, like physical and sexual abuse when I was in the Thomas Hubel event. So it was then I thought, wow, maybe that was my system starting to clear the trauma, deeper traumas from my system. So I tucked that away and forgot about it. And then what was happening over the course of a few days before I left was I started becoming much more aware of the fact that I act like a guest in my own home. So I don't decorate how I might if I was just me deciding, or what's on the TV. I often defer to my husband to play it and just play what I want that I don't think he'll like on my own in my room. But even like music I would listen to, usually just on my own, because I've heard comments about others not liking it. The temperature in the house, and then I would vocalize it. So that was the one thing I did vocalize, and it became this war between us. And I just started realizing these patterns. So I started vocalizing more of it, and it started causing some friction because my husband started feeling like I was dictating. And he was having to compromise now in ways that he wasn't even aware that he had to do before, that he was compromising me for in the past. And when I brought up even the temperature one, it ended up causing a huge fight. And then all this stuff was starting to come up. When the kids were visiting for Thanksgiving, I felt like my husband undermined me in a conversation. And I raised it with him. He got really upset. And he was like, we're not talking about this. And then it came up again the next day. And then he was like, we're going to talk about it right now. And it was like, rarely seen him that upset. And I first felt some fear. Then I thought, hey, I don't have to take this. And I went in the bedroom, shut the door. He was still yelling out there. And I had this fear. And I was like, okay, just see if I can ground and center this fear or this energy, feel into it, and then ground it. And the moment I did that, I was just meditating. And all of a sudden, I got like a thought in my head that was like, tune into Pam Gregory. She's an astrologer that I've been tuning into. She lives in the UK and she's a pretty large following, amazing kind of insights about what's coming up astrologically. So I tuned in, and she does a lot of different videos, ones that she does individually and ones that she does where she talks to other people. And I've never tuned into the ones where she's had the interviews. But for some reason, I felt drawn to this one talk that she did just a few days earlier with David Clements, who's a theoretical physicist who went to, as I mentioned, Oxford and Cambridge, and then was even like roaming in the same halls as Stephen Hawking's. And I started listening to the videos, and the resonance was so high. So I went from this contraction with my husband to being into an expansion where I felt complete joy and glee and high frequency of vibration, basically, and high resonance. It was validating so much of what I'd like seen in these different journeys and what I'd experienced and thoughts that I got and synthesized. It was like he was using some of the same exact words that I've used. So I'm going to share some of that. And before I do that, right before I left, so I saw that first video and I was like blown away by what he said. And I'll summarize that in a minute, why it was so powerful. But then I had more confidence and conviction in what I'm doing and what I'm experiencing, even if others don't understand it and think I'm crazy, including my husband. As I was vocalizing what I needed and I was like discovering these patterns and honoring my voice. So I ended up getting into another huge fight with him. And I ended it, I couldn't believe I was saying it. I was like, you know what, Ro? I don't think we're going to make it. I think we should separate. And the conversation ended there. And I happened to have an acupuncture appointment. And I left that place. And there was something. And then I came back and he texted me and was like, hey, do you want to get lunch? I just started crying in relief, wondering if he wanted, I'm still wondering, does he want to talk about the separation or does he want to reconcile? What's the tone? When I got back, it was so sweet. He just stayed close to me. Like he sat next to me, like shoulder to shoulder. He just stayed in the same space as me. And I think it was him gauging, is it really over? It was so comforting. And there was something about just saying it that was like, just going to the edges like that, open something up and just release this block. And the night before I left, it was like he spoke softly. He asked me about the temperature in the house and like whether I wanted to watch something on TV. And it was like this really beautiful, I don't know, gentle kind of engagement. And the night before I left, he said really softly, do you ever think you could be wrong? And I said, about what? He said, your fundamental beliefs now. And I said, yeah, many times. But I've just experienced and seen so much. And I said, do you ever think you could be wrong? And he looked at me like in surprise. I've never asked him that question. I was always on the defensive. And he said, no. I mean, there's so much evidence. There's so many people that believe it. And then he paused and he said, there have been times in history when the masses, the common knowledge has been wrong. And then we just left it there and I felt like an inner smiling. This is going to be one hell of a journey. So I started on my trip on December 4th was actually when I started the trip. And what I was blown away, and I was just completely drawn to David Clements' work. It was completely like, I was like obsessed with it. I was watching every interview and every talk, and like I subscribed to his Patreon channel then a couple days later, but on the plane, in the travel, like on the shuttle ride, everywhere, I was just listening, digesting content. And the thing that he's basically been saying is, so he was a theoretical physicist. He then started getting experiences like, and being drawn to things like blind readings, and he connected with his higher self and people from star nations like Pleiadians, Arcturians. He called it his higher self plus the team. And he was like channeling and hearing them and like sharing messages about what's happening on the planet. And he talks about how starting December 4th, there was going to be waves of light that were going to ignite humanity from within, an ignition. Basically what he was saying was that the seeds of all the different star nations is embedded in the human seed and it's dormant. But now it's going to start activating. And there are going to be these waves that start December 4th and continue. And he said that in mid-February, there's going to be like, he literally used the words, it's going to be like rocket launching, which is like literally the words I've been using. And he talked about the connection to the higher self and doing it through breathing, rhythmic breathing, into the sacred heart, which is 4.5, which is exactly what happened to me when I was in Vipassana back last September. I started feeling kind of this weird discomfort here. I started breathing, and that's when I felt like my higher self activated in my system and started guiding me through all this stuff. And then he talked about thought forms becoming entities and leading to trauma, and the whole point is to release trauma. And this is I even created a video on this when I was combining my theories on what Michael Levin found and what Vipassana found around our trauma. And then when we reinforce it, they become like entities, like internal family systems, these parts they're literally like entities that have thoughts and feelings and emotions. And as they get bigger, because they're reinforced, they eventually become entities that are even outside of us, but still attached to us, but outside of us. So people who hear voices and have severe mental illness, I could see the pattern too, and the way to heal by healing the trauma. And you start to shrink it. And essentially, he was talking about these thought forms becoming entities. And the whole point is to heal the trauma and the blocks and to remove the filters and lenses of the trauma, which are literally like what I described. For several years, I've been describing it like that. So it's just so validating. And one of the things he said is that we always have free will. So the higher self will never come in unless you want their support and invite them in. And this is something I specifically was like feeling, and what started saying, my will is divine will. I want my will to be divine will. And it was like the way to invite them in. And so it was just incredible. And the one thing I'll mention too is he talks about this disc meditation, which he said he does like every day. And it's a way to leverage your higher self to clear trauma from the system much more rapidly. Instead of having to suffer and purge and move through things at a much slower rate, wait till they come up, you can do this where it'll bring its stuff to the surface and clear it. When I listened to it, it was almost like the elements of it were identical to what I've been doing in my Sushumna clearing, and that I was led to, that I was doing in the beta coaching program we did, where we were seeing massive transformation and people's traumas coming to the surface. We were doing that same thing where we were basically creating a crystalline, and this is the other thing he talks about, is how the advanced beings and advanced like places are made of crystalline. So he talks about these ships that the advanced beings have that are made of liquid crystalline, and they can shapeshift based on their thoughts into whatever they need. And it's like a living intelligence. They can communicate with it. And so what's interesting is when I do the Sushumna clearing, I have people envision a pure crystalline cylinder around them. And then I have them imagine the Sushumna channel to go from the heavens to the earth through their body. And then I have them start breathing deeply and imagine, I didn't call it a disc, I called it a gentle twister that I'd learned from a teacher that is spinning at each energy center, each of the chakras. And as it's spinning, I would have them deep breathe, rhythmic breathing, and relax that part of the body. And then stuff would start coming up and I would feel it. And he talks about this in the disc meditation, is that you'll start feeling the energy of each part of the body or each energy center. And when I would feel resistance, I would be communicating with my clients around what is coming up for them. And then we would start clearing. And what started happening, the more I cleared, the more I was able to clear pain. So they would feel stuff moving out of their ears or up their back, or pain would just magically disappear. And I was just moving my hands, and my higher self was guiding with all of it, the guides. It wasn't like I was consciously trying to move anything. Just set an intention to try to clear it, and then it would just automatically start clearing. So we were witnessing all these miraculous things happening in this 10-week program that we were in. And so I would scan down the body, and they became so deep that people started moving from completely blocked and disconnected from their body to be able to detect their guides and spirits and like shamanic like gifts that were arising. So just phenomenal. So there was that kind of resonance. And then the last thing that he mentioned that I was blown away by was perpetual energy motion. So he talked about Nikola Tesla's work, and he was someone that he said was exploring this. And then John Bedini was another person that continued the work based on Tesla's work, and it actually created perpetual motion machine. Nikola Tesla had not created it, but had a lot of the theories around it. And then Bedini had created a transformer. So it was a black iron glass core, and there was coils around it, the transformer. But the coils were in double helix, like the DNA double helix. And then when they spinned it and they input pulses above input, the output was greater than the input. So they actually brought, when they rediscovered one of Bedini's transformers, it was like had been sitting for, I don't know, decades. And then they brought out, and it's somehow still activated, which didn't make sense to them. But then they called in David Clements to see if he could define the mathematical modeling to explain how this is possible. And as he was trying to do it, he was already connected to his higher self in the team. They said, you're not going to be able to do it right now. So he left, and then they showed him how to create that machine. And he started creating all these devices, and basically that are perpetual energy machine motion. And what he said was, it's just like the human being, it's got the DNA, the double helix. He said it's like the caduceus, the serpents, two serpents, that it is like a double helix that wrap around a central shaft. And that's the same as the human body, if you think about it. Like the Ida Pingala channel, which is the two energetic channels around the central Sushumna channel, the energetic channel. in Vedic traditions, they call it Ida and Pingala. They're two energetic channels that intertwine, like the DNA helix, the double helix. And through the center, the Kundalini starts to rise. And so that's like new energy that comes up. And he talks about it, he calls it living energetics, where in modern physics, the energy is dead. It's like atoms, molecules, for clusters of them, large-scale structures. If you do a battery and attach it to a light, it'll eventually like decline. It'll discharge and then die. But in living energetics, and he said it's around plasma, and he talked about David Bohm, which is someone that I was really drawn to and studying, obsessed with again, and drawn to for some reason. And I was just, he brings him up and said that David Bohm had discovered the characteristics of plasma being very different than matter. And it's much more fluid. It's at a very high temperature, matter, and it starts to exhibit completely different characteristics, like it's self-organizing, and it seems much more intelligent. So he said it doesn't, the modern physics, the laws of modern physics don't apply. And what he found was that this machine that Bedini had created, it had, when it was activated and spinning, he said he could feel the energy, like in the room. Like as soon as he stepped in the room, he could feel the energy, like a powerful energy. And then as soon as he stepped out, it was gone. So it was almost like it was contained in this space, and it was like a being. And then he started creating these devices, and like one he calls like the Serenity device, so you can put it in environments. And he said that, so the photons from the sun, they're coded with information, like a library of information with every photon. When it hits us, we absorb that information, it collects information from us, and it keeps passing it on. And so there's just a living intelligence. And then, but there can be generative photons and degenerative ones. So like a 5G, so man-made kinds of things. A 5G cell tower was put near a building, an office building, and everyone started getting sick. Not everyone, a lot of people started getting sick. And then they put this little device, which looks like a pyramid structure. And his higher self and team helped him, guided him on how to build it. Really simple. It looked like it's made of cardboard or something. But it's able to channel, like raise the frequency in the space so they're not affected by these the degenerative photons from the 5G tower. And the interesting thing was, he said it ended up being the shape of a pyramid. And the pyramids, which I talked about, Robert Edward Grant studied this when he was decrypting cryptology. Matthias de Stefano, also at the pyramids. I forget the guy who looks at sound healing, but he was basically also talking about magical things happening in the pyramids. But essentially, all of them have been talking about how it's a portal for connecting to other dimensions, a bridge. And it can actually bring in, when you hit the right frequency. So Matthias de Stefano talks about when he was humming, he had 12 people, and then he was guided when he started humming and getting to resonance on how to structure them in the space. And then when that happened, they started downloading codes, light codes, from other dimensions and so on, into this plane. Robert Edward Grant talked about the angles of the pyramids and like the pyramidic structure. And now David Clements is talking about how this is the shape that's used to shift these degenerative photons and to clear spaces and to tap into this living energetics. Just phenomenal. Okay, so basically I got to the retreat, and to summarize it, in the first 3 journeys and the first 3 days, it was hell. I was like, before it started though, I had this, I subscribed to David's Patreon channel, and I was listening to his latest transmission for December 7th. And it was basically creating like a cocoon, a stabilizing cocoon to deal with these waves. And so I did it. And what was interesting was, right before that, my roommate, who's also a big fan of David Clements, so instantly knew what I was talking about, wanted me to do the Shishimna with her. So I did a Shishimna clearing with her when I was describing it. And then suddenly it took me into this deeper state where I felt like I was a little more connected to my higher self. And then it happened, our beginning of our journey, where we were going to be drinking lemongrass tea and purging, like drinking gallons of water and then basically vomiting to clear our systems as a starting point. Yeah, joy. And essentially it ended up being delayed because it was pouring rain. So I had time to listen to this video, and I felt, when I listened to it, I felt my higher self kick in, and I started moving in these dance-like forms. And the interesting thing was, the night, I want a caveat before I finish this, the night before when we got there, my roommate had left out some fruit, and we ended up with all these cockroaches in the room, and it freaked me out. There was a couple even on my bed, and I just freaked out. It was like really hot. There were these cockroaches, and it was like, I was like, couldn't even sleep. I was like so scared and disturbed. I just started crying at one point. I just wrapped myself in my sheet and thought, I just hope they don't like climb over me. And if they do, I don't want to feel them. So I was like feeling all this. Then like I was in the middle of this meditation, and David was basically walking us through describing these activations that are happening on the planet, and how the earth is now, the frequency is rising, Mother Earth, and all the shadows are coming to the surface, which is exactly what I've been feeling and talking about. But then in the meditation, he had us basically go through the 12 membranes of the earth, and each one is a different frequency, and we're basically releasing anything we contributed to the dormancy of that membrane in this meditation. So we were going through it, and my hands started moving in these like graceful dance-like forms, and it would change with each membrane. I would feel different kind of movement, energy. At the end, he was saying he felt like the serenity and grace of it, which matched exactly what I was feeling. But then I got this vision as I was there and moving and feeling all of this, like this peace and joy, I know it sounds gross, but it was a beautiful scene. A bunch of cockroaches were in the rafters of our bungalow. And then above them were all these birds, including hummingbirds. And then there was fireflies in the deep night sky with the stars, and they were all glowing. And it was like, and singing or something. Like, it was almost like this celebration of all of life. And so then I felt, you know what, maybe I'm like, what kind of planetary healer am I going to be if I can't even handle a few cockroaches? And I thought they made me less scared of the mosquitoes. I was like buying 100,000 things to prevent my getting eaten by the mosquitoes. So I'm like, they got me to up level. I'm not scared of mosquitoes anymore. And maybe if I meet a demon, I won't be scared of cockroaches either. But anyway, it was this joke that they might become my allies over time. And that's kind of how I started feeling. I started communicating with them. They stopped bothering me altogether. We didn't see them anymore. So that was funny. But anyway, then what happened over the next 3 nights was, so the first, they had a prep session. I felt like nothing. They diluted it just to get us prepped. But I thought this was like, oh my God, I'm feeling hardly anything. I might have made a mistake. Are these guys the real thing? All these thoughts started coming in my head. The second night it continued. I got a couple of images. Like as soon as I took the medicine, the tea, the ayahuasca, my stomach swelled up with pain. And then I felt like I was pregnant. My stomach was like swelled. And I was just resting. And then I like had diarrhea, and then kept having to go like a few times, and was like uncomfortable. And then I had this image. So it was like this kind of birth. It felt like pregnancy kind of thing. Then I had this weird image later where it was like lightning was striking, and then I saw myself in a coffin. And every time the lightning would strike, I'd seen some kind of inscription on the coffin. It wasn't English. It was like, I don't know, Latin, Russian, I don't know. It was some like different language I didn't understand. And then I would feel like my body would physically lock. I couldn't move it. And I panicked a little bit. And then I felt this rush of energy from like my head to maybe my torso, but down my body as I was lying down. That was like a really high fever, like so, like it wasn't pleasant. It was very unpleasant. But it's like sharp energy, like tingling or whatever, like kind of feeling that would go, not tingling, it was more like shaking or something. I don't know, the energy was moving like that, like flickering kind of thing. And it happened twice. And I thought maybe it's just my body releasing trauma or something. And then even the third night, so let's see, yeah, the third night, I felt even more pregnant when I took it. Like my stomach actually hurt. It was like swelled up. And then I ended up, and then I had diarrhea. I had to keep going. It was almost like my system it was like water practically. It was like, I'm like, what the hell's going on, man? I got a few, my usual things that I experienced since I had some movement, and I felt, but it was nothing. It was like way weaker than what, and I was like so worried. But by the third night, I surrendered. I said, you know what? I think this is a contraction. I need to trust the process and honor what's happening. And even when I connected with my higher self and guides, like that's the message I got, is trust us. Like surrendered to it. But there was still like judgment and so on. And in there, I'd also gotten into a huge fight with my roommate because I had brought a fan, and I finally figured out how it would work, and she didn't like the noise, and I was boiling in the heat and blew up. But then it ended up, and she was like, I hadn't said what I needed so clearly, and we ended up having this really beautiful conversation where I was sharing how I was trying to move through this transition, and she was so supportive, gave me a hug, and I was moved to tears. So it was like just continuous surrender. And then I had what they call the crown. They have 3 crowns or whatever, and they basically activate your connection to the cosmos, your higher self. And so like I didn't feel anything. It was fascinating the way he was like making sounds, and you could hear the clicking of the crown being put in place and so on. But honestly, I was skeptical that there was like anything to it. So then the 4th night, now that's the big deal. And then I gotta end it so it's not like crazy long here. So Before I start though, what I wanted to mention was, before I went in, this was, I think, the second night, I looked up, so in my astrology, that Stephanie Azaria, she's the astrologer I work with, before and I meet with her monthly so she can share with me what's transiting through my chart. It helps me understand, because so much crazy stuff happens, it helps me understand more deeply and what might be happening, how I can think about it. But she talked about Pluto. So she said, Pluto is right on the supergalactic center in my chart. And so it basically means that I carry rare, powerful relational gravity. Connections are faded, transformative, and karmic. So simple relationships are impossible. And it really was so comforting to find that, because I feel like I've struggled to fit in and connect with people. And I have these really deep, transformative relationships, like with my husband and my business partner, and that have so much like contraction expansion cycles, like turbulence and trauma, like friction, and then big block releases through it. So it was so comforting to read that and give me a narrative that could allow me to let go of this feeling of not being included or not fitting in. Like it created purpose to my experience and so on. And then it also meant that it's a deep instinct to bring things in alignment, even if that means destruction at first, which feels so resonant to, like, especially with my husband. But essentially, in my case, so Pluto, who's the Lord of the underworld, all about transformation, death and rebirth and so on, is so many places in my chart. Rules my Scorpio moon, is at my midheaven on the world axis, which means my public path is defined by my emotional truth and authentic expression ripple out into the collective, because it's on the world axis and it's at my midheaven, which means that it's visible, very visible. And Pluto trines to my natal Pluto and Sedna. And Sedna is the deep cosmic archetype of divine feminine with a 12,000-year orbit. So she's like the cosmic librarian, holding records of feminine experience across time. So I was like feeling all this, and they basically suggested from that is that I've had Plutonian power in the past, and in this life I'm meant to learn how to balance and use that power for good. So we'll see where it goes. But so the fourth night, okay, so it was so interesting. So I went up, I got a half a cup, and it was less than I'd gotten in the past, and I felt literally nothing. And I thought, oh my God, another night of like nothing. Maybe it's gonna be a fourth night of contraction. I'm just gonna try to trust. But I was feeling disappointed and went up for only got another half cup. And then this time my stomach didn't swell much. I went to the bathroom once, but it was like no big deal. And then this thought came into my head, like, so why don't you see if you can connect with your higher self? Like while you're in the journey, maybe it's easier access. So I started doing, and what I remembered from my experience at Vipassana when I first activated the higher self was like, I would do this in-breath and then I would slowly release, and it would further activate a feeling here in my chest, which I realized is the 4.5 chakra, between the 5th and the 4th chakra, the heart and the throat. There's one in the center, like right around here somewhere in here. But essentially, I started feeling it like would activate when I would do that, because it would catch there and I was trying to expand it and open it. So it was like I was trying to do that, and then I would slowly exhale. And I kept doing it. This discomfort or this feeling in my chest would grow, and then the channel would open. So I started doing that, this rhythmic breathing. And the image I started getting was, instead of the image I've mentioned before, which is like this, take the geometric shape of the cross, not meant to be religious, but the geometric shape, it would be like a stake in the ground, the Sushumna into the earth, especially the root chakra. And then the horizontal is I would open my heart and then keep my awareness on the center. That's where love, it's the highest frequency, resides. And then the energy would organize itself. And I can transmute dark entities or dark energies or lower vibrations or trauma. So that's something that I employed. And so I started, but instead of seeing that cross, what I started to see was the silhouette of a beautiful tree, huge tree of life, like Noirao. And it was like black silhouette, but then outlined it was bioluminescent, like white light. And I could see the roots moving into the earth, into the core of the earth. And the branches were like up into branching all the way out into the sky, up to the heavens. And then I saw lightning, and it would touch one of the branches and come through, and there was a heart in the center of the trunk was the heart of my heart, and I would imagine it opening, and then the lightning would transmute through there and move into the ground, into the earth. So I would see these lightning strikes, and then it would move to the heart and into the earth. just, I don't know, this cool image. So I kept breathing, and then all of a sudden, I felt like a surge of energy. And what started happening then was, it was like electricity going through me. And it was like, it felt like I could feel it. It was like moving through my body, and I could feel, it was almost like every cell was like coming alive or something. And so it was creeping. I could down my arms into my fingers, and I could feel the numbness. It was almost like it was moving numbness or something. And they were activating, and I could feel it starting to creep into my fingers, and my fingers were like, it was almost like they were coming to life. And then when I finally, at the tips of the fingers activated, everything was activated, I could feel so much, like every vibration and sound and movement and heart and like everything in the room, the forest, like it was stunning. I was like so much awe. My mouth kept dropping from being in so much awe of how much I could feel. And then right then, one of the shamans came, because I'm sure he could sense the energy, and started to sing to me. And they do this, really, they sing these icaros that are for you, based on what they're channeling. And as he started to sing, I could see colors, and I could feel the vibration of, he was singing, and it felt like pure joy and love. And I was like, I started laughing and giggling. And then when they spray water, like on your head, and you put your arms together, and they spray it on your hands, and it felt, I don't know, like the water was like kissing my skin. It was so stunning. And I was like feeling so much joy. And then what started happening was I started feeling surges of power. It felt like raw power into my system. And at first I was like hyperventilating and like freaked out and trying to like contain it. And then I was like, wait, that's not the way to do it. Ground my energy, open my heart. So ground the Sushumna, open my heart. The same thing I knew. So I imagined the tree, the roots of the tree into this core of the earth. And then the opening of the eye of the tree, opening, my heart opening. And immediately, like the power stabilized. And then I got another surge. And the feeling and the message I got was they were trying to see how much power can I contain? Can they bring more into the system, into the earth, into the body? So there were multiple rounds of this. Each round, I would start hyperventilating, and then I would remember to ground and open the heart. And then I could feel it. It was like, and I experienced then, like I started getting these sensations and images of all of duality, all of polarity collapsing into oneness, into singularity. Like I saw like the history and the birth of, and evolution of creation, like all in a blink of an eye, like absolutely phenomenal. And I came to the stillness that was like source. And like, I felt like my heart stopped, and time stopped, and my breathing stopped. And it was just, I was completely absorbed in this incredible stillness. And then I started feeling, ooh, what can I do with this? And my heart was wide open, and it was love, just unconditional love pouring out of it into the room, into the space. And I started seeing, what can I tune into? And anyone I put my awareness on in the room, I would suddenly, if they were purging, I'd feel what they were feeling in their body, and like the pain and the suffering and like the purging and so on. And I felt myself getting sucked in, because I was like that. I felt like I was them. And then I got visions of like anaconda snakes. Like I was the snake, and then I was in the darkness, and I was like these creatures and like these vile sentiments and feelings and trauma. It was like, I was it. And then like the Icaro singing was like chanting that was like a hypnotic imprisonment. I was stuck in this like hell. And then I was like, oh my God, like, am I gonna throw up? And then suddenly I remembered again, no. And I basically like, again, like sat up and imagined the tree roots into the ground, grounded my energy, opened my heart, and then it immediately transmuted to light, and I came back to center. And one of the things that David Clements said is, we don't have to suffer and slowly remove these things as they come up and purge, and we can ask our higher selves and our guides to help us and clear it like that. We can clear it like that. We don't have to suffer. And so that's what I started realizing was, and then I started moving my hand across the room. And as I did that, I could feel and I could hear people either starting to purge or start to laugh. Like the vibration was so high that was emanating that it would bring their trauma to the surface. So as I was moving it, I noticed like I stopped one person, she started purging and vomiting. And then I was like, oh, and then by the time I went all around the room, it was like cacophony. There was so much noise of people, like sounds and crying and laughter and purging. And then I was like, oh my God, I think I've overactivated. And I started trying to ground the energy through me and can open my heart. And then it came to this place of like deep ease and peace and love, pure love in the space. And people were sighing and they were like laughing, and I ended up laying down and my hands up behind my head and just, I don't know, I felt like I was like laying on a hammock, just looking at the stars or something really easeful and beautiful. And then I left the space when it ended in awe, and I was like feeling the forest and all of the creatures in it. And it was like a waveform, and I was like moving with the waveform, and it was almost as if nature was participating and I was connected to it. It was stunning. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd get all these images and messages and taken into other realms and see like the history of creation. Like it was like hard to sleep. I couldn't sleep, but it was in so much awe. It was so stunning. So I think that might be where I'm at. And the thing I forgot to mention was when I got the crown on the third night, they required me to fast. I ended up having to fast. I ended up fasting for 45 hours with like 12 hours of no water, 45 hours of no food, no shower. And I was in this grimy state when I came into the fourth journey, when everything took off. So I think there was something about moving to surrender and acceptance. Maybe it was the fasting, maybe it was like connecting to my higher self. I don't know, the combination of it. Maybe it was destined. But I have no idea what's going to happen. So the next few days, which I'll do another recording later, is essentially we start tonight. We have 2 journeys, tonight, tomorrow night. Then we're going to have a 1-day gap and then do another 2, and then we're done. So I don't know what's going to happen. I might be taken into deeper contractions. I might experience further contractions. We'll see what they have in mind, but I can't wait. All right, see you later.